Holly Rustick, you're back. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. We're going to talk all about grant writing, all about all the things. Let's start with an intro. Tell us about the work you do, about your program, and we'll dig right in.
Sure. So we help new and seasoned grant writers replace their full-time income on flexible hours writing grants from home. And we also help people quit their toxic nonprofit jobs and enter into becoming freelance grant writers. And we're really doing this at a high momentum right now because that is our mission. So we're helping a lot of people out there, and we love the work that grant writers and nonprofits do, but we just want to really create more equity in the space and fair pricing.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you back in. Your episode was one of our top listened to episodes. So we want to hear about the grants. We want to hear about all the things. Let's start by just talking about why you should hire a freelance grant writer, or should you hire just a staffer to do this? Can't somebody from programs just write some grants for you? So give us kind of the lay of the land there.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because the problem that we really see is grant writer has and all other duties as necessary. It's not just all other duties as necessary thrown on their lap. They're usually actually hired like as a program manager, as a case manager, or something else. Like even the role grant writer is few and far between. So they're usually hired to write grants, but they have to have the other title to get paid. So they're doing two jobs, etc. So we could talk a lot about that and just like ethically and all of the things. But if we really like just pry apart that question, you could say how efficient is that, for one? So are you hiring a staff grant writer to actually write grants? Because if they're lucky, a grant writer that's a staff grant writer might be, I say higher than this, but really it's lower. I think it's about, I would say if they're lucky, 40% of their time actually writing grants, if they're lucky. And that would be on the high end because they still have to go to the meetings. If they're staff, they still have to do all the other staffy things. They have to jump in on that fundraiser event. They're doing all the, you know what I mean? And they're not actually spending a lot of time actually writing grants or managing grants or following up on grants. They really don't have a grant strategy. It's you, the executive director or the board going, get these grants or find some grants, but they're not really doing high level thinking or strategy on it. They just have enough time. It's not their fault. It's not because they're not able. It's because, well, it's kind of because they're not able. It's not able because they don't have time, right? They don't have time to actually sit back and think. It's just the doing, the getting it in. They're working weekends. They're working evenings. They're even on vacation. They're taking their laptops because of the never-ending cycle of grants. It can turn into a very unhealthy pattern for a majority of the nonprofits. And that was me in the nonprofit world before I became a freelancer. That was a lot of people. I hear that again and again. So I'm not saying it can't work. There are people that are happy in their grant writing, but it's because they have boundaries. It's because they're at least doing 85% of their time writing grants, right? And all of that. But the difference then you ask like the difference between hiring someone, there's still a staff grant writer is still just going to be checking the box a lot of times, right? They're still going to have to, adhere to everything else that your nonprofit is doing. Where if you hire a freelance grant writer, that is your grant writing department. They're your grant writing strategy. They're thinking about it. That's all they're doing, right? It's 100% their scope of work. That is such a different relationship than having someone underneath your organization, kind of within it, kind of working on it as much as they can. Right? It's such a different relationship. And you can save a lot of money hiring a freelance grant writer. You can get someone on retainer. You're not paying their fringe benefits. You're not paying their taxes. You're not paying for an office space or a computer, right? So you are able to actually set aside a retainer budget that will actually help your nonprofit overall. And then just focus on the grants. So it's huge.
One of the things you said was like high impact strategy. Yeah. And I think it's really easy with grant writing to be like, we should apply for the grants. The grants. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, you know what I mean. So what does that actually mean to be like, no, there actually should be a strategy around, it's not throw spaghetti at the wall. It's what is it instead? And maybe kind of a two-pronged question. Should you hire a grant writer that is a specialized expert in a particular sector? If you're an arts organization, do you want somebody who only does that? Or is it okay if they're agnostic?
Yeah, great question. So definitely I'll start with that one. So you can, but it doesn't matter at the same time. So we actually have a lot of grant writers in our Freelance Grant Writer Academy where we help them get to their specific niche, whether that is writing federal grants or writing foundation grants or writing state grants. Like some just like to stay in certain lanes. Some like to write just foundation grants for arts organizations, right? And I'm like, that's amazing because you're going to get to know all of those specific grants like the back of your hand, right? You're going to be in that field. You're going to know what's going on, all of the trends, all of the things within that specific niche. Where some are like, no, I want to focus on arts organizations, but I can also write federal grants, foundation grants. So they may be working with different size nonprofits, but based in the same cause area. And for that, you can have a nonprofit. Like I've written grants for science, indigenous languages, like all of the things. Like I don't have a PhD in any of that, right? So a lot of times grant writers are kind of ghost writers at the same time. So there are some benefits to hiring someone in that niche for sure, because they can be more on top of the industry. However, it's not entirely necessary either, as long as they have the skills. So going back to your question about like just sending out, the same 2-page letter of inquiry to 100 places, and you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're going to get no's up and down, like 100 no's. So how we like position that is we actually have inside our academy a 30-day master template, grant writing template, where we actually help you write. It's a very robust, like 28-page master grant template, and it takes you through the frameworks of an entire grant and all the attachments that they may need. And what we say is we recommend that all of our students, and they love this, they start with their nonprofits, whether they're selling them a package or they're doing a retainer with them, they start there. And what's so important about there is they start doing what is your priority project that you want funding, and why that's so important. You know this, Christina, right? Is the nonprofit's not going to work with you for 6 months and throw you 3, 5, 10 different, oh, we could write this and we could write that and we have this program, we have that program. Like it actually helps you take the executives at the nonprofit and say, what's your priority? We're going to spend some time developing this template. We're going to give it back and forth with you a couple of times so you can see what we're working through. We're going to get information for you. And this is what we're going to focus on getting funding for the next 6 months or the next year. And now you have buy-in from the executives on the nonprofit. You can reel them back in because they're all visionaries, and I love it. They're all visionaries, but you got to reel them back in. And then you can also like start doing your grant prospecting research. That's on that program. It's about that program. It's connected to that template. So then by the time you're ready, you find the best fit grants, which might be 10, might be 5. We're looking at smaller numbers here, but they are very good. Like the best fit that you can have. You're looking at 990s, right? You're looking at all these things for funding sources. You're really spending time, and there's an art and a science to grant research. And then you're able to write the grants so much quicker because you have the template. So that's our process on how to like prioritize that and how to actually get a higher ROI on the grant writing as well. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I always have all of our club members go in and like set their goals, set their intentions. And the whole point is to figure out what is it I really want to do. And it cracks me up because it's like, I want to start a monthly giving program. I want to re-engage our lapsed donors. I want to courageously ask for more. I also want to build out more major donors, and we need sponsors. And I'm like, whoa.
We need grants.
Right?
We need
right. And it's like, that's right. And it's like, what is that? For me, it's like, what is the highest ROI activity? What is the most perfect fit? Let's start there. And I love this creative list, and we'll just go one at a time. So it sounds like a version of that, but the idea of this template, almost like this brand standard. Ooh, if I was a grant writer too, I would love that too. I'd be like, this is our foundational piece that we're going to go back to and go, that's why we're prospecting over here and not over here. Great idea. And here's where we're at.
Yeah, it helps you just like with boundaries with your clients too. It's like such like a win-win-win-win, right? So it's like you're helping them get clear, there's buy-in, but they're also like, what about this one? And then you're like, no. Like we can go there. And I like that too. It's like they have great ideas. There's a lot of great vision. I'm not saying there's not, but if it's not focused and there's not like a timeline for it, it's there, you're just not going to have as well as an ROI. You're going to be all scattered. You're going to be charging them more. They're not going to see the results as fast because you have to work so much more, right? So this gives them a timeline, and you can say, okay, in 6 months or 12 months, once we get funding for this, then we'll look at that priority number 2, right? Then we'll go to that next place. So it's also like, we're probably going to be working with you in your grant department for a number of years even, right? Because then when you have the institutional knowledge of that nonprofit, that's very valuable for them and you, right?
So this just popped in my head, but is it a symptom of like maybe not having something like that, like a standard template? When somebody, an organization says, we've applied for grants, we barely get any, or we don't get any, or like there's that saltiness to it. And I'm thinking of a few. Love
Yeah,
you. I see you, I'm thinking of you. And they may have a volunteer, a board member, a part-timer who's slash admin account person doing it, right? It's sort of like that. So is this a symptom of maybe just this not having a standard template and also maybe not having continuing ed support? So
yeah.
if you weren't a freelancer, is the academy something that maybe this role, who this person is like, maybe they don't know what they don't know about it, right? Yeah.
For sure. And we actually have nonprofits that pay. It's so funny. They actually pay for their volunteer or a board
Yeah.
member or someone to actually do the academy, because we teach you how to write grants, and we also teach our business acumen skills. So they might just hang out in the grant writing place. And it's like $2,500 for 1 year, which is like, wait, like we have unlimited grant reviews in this program, where if you're not in our program, our company does offer one grant review is $2,500. Like that's the difference. So, and then you get all of the course, you get the master grant template, you get all of our attachments, you get everything. You can come to our weekly calls and ask questions. And the unlimited grant reviews is a huge thing in our program. So before you submit your grant, we even review your template that you create, the master grant template, and you can create multiple ones. So after you do get funding for that program, let's create another one that you can submit it for us to review and give you feedback on, which is so valuable. Because like you said, it is like that miss of, not having a grant strategy is one of those things that happens. Not having the training is definitely the other thing. I can't tell you how many times nonprofits will just, everybody wants to learn grant writing, or a lot of people do. They understand the value of it. So you have a lot of interns and all of that. But if you just say, go learn how to write grants, it's going to be so overwhelming. They're not going to hang out forever, etc. But if you actually give them the training, they will stick around for a long time, right? They might become a staff member then, or they may become a consultant with you, and they're going to understand your nonprofit and be able to write so many of these grants and get you so much funding. Like, it is such a great investment to give training to those people that you're asking. Even if it's a grant writer that is the staff, but you need to give them grant training. You do.
My wish for the sector is that every single staff member had a line item for continuing education they could spend on any sort of professional development. They go to a conference, they could hire a coach, they could join a program. And it's like, it's such a misstep and such a so short-sighted to think, well, we shouldn't invest, right? They can DIY it. They can watch a webinar, right? They can YouTube it. And it's like, no, you just said they would literally get it reviewed, right?
Yeah.
Reviewed before. I mean, come on. And it's like, the value of that is so important. The other thing too is I think we also often in the sector, we give paid roles to what should be a paid role to an unpaid person, whether it's a volunteer, an intern, a friend, right? Somebody. And it's like, if we want them to succeed, let's make sure we help them succeed, right?
Yeah.
So some sort of support, development, course, coaching program. It's so not fair. I remember years back, we were talking about my agency background. When we had interns, it was very quick. I quickly learned the value of an intern is for them. I'm teaching them an experience. It was not, let me throw a bunch of work over the wall to a college student. And it's like, let me not throw a bunch of work over the wall to a volunteer who may have written one grant once. Like, let me set them up to succeed. So I love that you're,
and then they're going to get
that
rejection, right? And then that's gonna impact them showing up. They're really not going to want to show up to your nonprofit. Like, there's so much with grants. Oh man, like you do get rejections, and that's a part of it. And to understand why, and then we even review people's grants that have gotten rejected, and they're like, hey, can you guys review it so we can get some feedback, because we want to submit again in the future, but we want to submit it better, right? So we give that as well, because that's really valuable, right? And we even say, hey, can you give feedback on it if you didn't get it awarded? Like, let's actually look at some data instead of it just being a personalized, oh, I did a really bad job writing this, or they don't believe in my nonprofit. I hear that a lot. They don't believe in the work that we do. And it's like, no, that's not it at all. But I've been a federal grant reviewer for over 10 years and a grant writer for 20 years. It is not like every nonprofits take it personal, but it's really not. The process is not. So yeah, it's
okay,
usually,
you got to say more about that.
yeah, it's usually because they didn't respond to the criteria. The criteria said, give us a clear goal. And you just said, hey, we want to help some people. That's not a clear goal. And then you go into a flowery, poetic story about all of the things that are wrong about it or whatever you do. And it's like, they can't really score you on that. Right. And I know you can use some of that like more emotive language and fundraising and that sort of thing. But in grants, no. Yeah. And that's where you shine. Right. But bringing that same thing into grants is not where you're going to get scored. And then you are basing it on that emotional kind of story. So you're saying they don't love us or they don't support us, they don't believe in us because they're not connecting with our emotional story. But with grants, you literally cannot score a grant review on emotional story. Like
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. I've loved programs and I'm like, I wish I could score you higher, but you are not responding to the criteria and I have to score you on this. That's the only way. Yeah.
I hope everybody really like hears that, right? I'm remembering I'm having a flashback, Holly, to like a webinar you were teaching a few years ago. And you were so fast on your, like, I think you were doing a grant search, engine search or something like that for prospecting. And I remember thinking, you're so fast. It's because you've literally seen every facet of the grant writing process. Like you said, from reviewing to writing to submitting different types of grants to researching. And it's like, that is the value too of a coach. To me, that is the value of a coach. It's like, do you want results faster? Hire a coach, join a program. I have no doubt that you could check out a bunch of books from the library, watch some webinars, and ultimately get there. But wouldn't it be more fun to get there faster? And with somebody guiding you along the way? I don't know. I just had that memory of you being like, and it's like, yeah, that is the value of investing. That is the value of investing in continuing education and investing in a coach and investing in support too, because there's also that piece. And it's also like the trends of like, what is happening in the sector? My next question for you is, can't we just use ChatGPT? Can't we just use AI for grants? So tell us what to say to the board member that comes up with that one.
I love that. I love that so much because, and just full disclosure, I'm not like the super AI grant girl, but Philip Dang is the grant girl man. He owns Grantable, which is an AI for grant writing, but we're really close. And he came into our program recently and he's been on my podcast and all the things. And we're staying really close on top of that trend. But what he and I, especially as industry leaders, have really talked about is it's the magic of that master grant template again. You can use AI, but it's not to build that out. You still need a human to do that because a grant is formulaic, but there's also thinking involved. Like, if this is really a need, how does this research go with this? It's that puzzle. And AI is just not up to speed on that yet. And especially like, where is the priorities with a nonprofit and this conversation and building that out? But once you have that, and the other thing too is AI is really bad at doing research. So one of the things when I first started using ChatGPT, I was like, "Ooh, I can maybe help me with my research and grants because that's a time-consuming part, like to get sources and citations." And it gave me like this beautiful list of like 10 sources, and it had like a works cited thing. And then I was checking all the links, and like 8 out of 10 were dead. So I was talking to Phil about that. And I said, "Phil, what's up with that?" And he goes, "Actually, AI is terrible at research. It's good at writing. It's terrible at research, and it's just making things up. It's making things up." I think it's called like a hallucinate, whatever. Yeah, hallucinating. Yeah. So it's like a weird term for that, but I was like, "Ooh, that makes sense, right?" So, but even the writing, you still need to do the thought process, putting something that together, and then you might be able to take some of that to respond to a criteria. So then it's saying because you're prioritizing your project, you're not putting everything in there, but then you apply for a grant that makes sense, you see the criteria, and you say, okay, use this template now to write out my objectives for this to respond to it in this certain way. So you use your own writing to create the grants and using like Grantable or something like that, right? Or ChatGPT. And it's not just scouring the internet for it, it's using your writing. So then it
Yeah.
actually, you can create grants a lot quicker. A lot of my clients are looking into that. Some of them are using that. And then, you might be able to write a lot more grants, especially for startups. Then nonprofits can kind of enter that space and it's more equitable. And that's his big thing, Phil's, is creating more equity for nonprofits too. Not we're just the big dogs that can hire a grant writer, can apply for the grants, right? So it is, but you still need to do that startup work. It's so important. Otherwise, your grant's not going to read right. It's not going to get scored well. So there is ways, I think, that you can apply it, but there has to be a strategy behind it, and you still need to do the human work up front. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, listen, huge fan of ChatGPT, totally agree. I think it's the same way. It's like I use it, but I use it often to organize my thoughts. I use it sometimes to just have a brainstorm session. You're not getting any content that it wrote for me. And I find too, it's redundant. And so for grant writing, it sounds like too, it's like, stop repeating yourself. And it's like, it will say the same line, 6 different ways. And so it can be a helpful resource, it sounds like, in the process, but not the main course to it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Part of the strategy, but don't go there first because you just won't get your grants awarded. And you're not going to learn how to write a grant either. So yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about some giving trends. So election year, we've seen individual giving down. That's kind of hit the headlines. What are you seeing in the grant space? What's working? What's not? What do you see in the next year or 2 years? What does that look like for you?
So there's still money that was infused during COVID that's in line that needs to be spent out. So we're still seeing that, but I do think that we're going to kind of creep up on the expiration of that soon, right? So I think what we're looking at, though, is really interesting, and it does reflect a lot on politics, especially federal grants. Different priorities can change, different things within politics, like about federal monies, et cetera, right? So it is important to kind of stay abreast of that and to see how that kind of lays out. But we are seeing, which is great, is federal grants have prioritized a lot more marginal communities, BIPOC populations, even looking at like, does your board, are they made up of BIPOC if you're asking for BIPOC monies? Like they really want to see that integration of that. And I think that's fantastic. And people are even getting priority points for that and for marginalized communities. So we are seeing, we're seeing more of that. And I do love that. We're also seeing things like Mackenzie Scott, right? We're also seeing things like different types, like individual donors giving out these massive grants. So we are seeing, and even Just Grants is awesome, where you can write a grant and then it will connect you with different funding sources. So it's kind of like a universal application and then they would connect it, right? So it'd be like a great place to put a master grant template. So there's kind of this shift in giving, and there's also more conversation in general between the funders and the grant writers, right? Or the nonprofits applying for funds. So in the past, we just saw a lot of like the grant writers asking the foundations, like, how is this written? Are we eligible for this? Blah, blah, blah. But now we're kind of seeing more of the pushback. And I think Voulet, I'm not sure if you know Voulet with, yeah, he's awesome. And his whole movement too, that I see or notice, right, is that it is creating more equity in that space. And why do we have to do all of these, like, oh my gosh, it's just so ridiculous sometimes, all of we
got a link to his LinkedIn threads of like on the show notes of where he's like calling out grant funders, right? And he's like, come on, you guys. Yeah.
And it's so like, there's so many, you got to check this box and you got to do that. And it's very bureaucratic in so many ways. And then it does marginalize the people, once again, that may be able to hire a grant writer or not, right? So he's really like holding the light up to that. But we are seeing more of that conversation then to be like, why is this like this? Instead of just accepting it. And I think that's really good. And that's also why you do want a freelance grant writer, because in a lot of ways you don't have to pay as much as an in-person staff. So that can also create more equity. And then they're also that part of that grant strategy of asking those hard questions to funding sources, right? Because as a freelance grant writer, like what we do too is we actually call funding sources. We have conversations. We ask a lot of questions before we submit the grant so we can get the best points awarded, all of the things, and we can have some of those tougher conversations. So it is that they are listening more now, and they are holding like, even town halls, like online town halls and that sort of thing, to have more of this candid conversation. So I think that's good. And even one of the things I thought talking about AI was like, I wonder if that's going to affect, because if a lot of people just start writing grants using AI without having like a strategy, it's also going to create like, what is the impact and the capacity on the funding source side? Now getting a huge influx.
A bottleneck.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, it'll be interesting. We're in interesting times with the grants. They're still going to be around in our lifetime. I'm going to say that they will be, but I do believe there will be changes. And I don't believe that grant writers will be out of a job because of any of the changes that we're looking at now with AI and everything. We I think we'll move more into the grant strategist sphere. And that's what I tell a lot of people in the Freelance Grant Writer Academy. I'm like, you're not really just freelancers, you're grant strategist. And that's how they really position themselves, because it is doing that human thinking and strategy. And then, yeah, they're spending time writing grants. If AI can help them write more grants, that's great. And they don't have to spend as much time there. They can focus more on the strategy then, right? And on changing things in the industry and having those harder conversations, because they can think about it. They have the space to think about it from a higher level. So
yeah,
definitely.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Super fun.
We're going to do a couple of rapid fire questions.
Yes.
So what would be one piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring grant writer? So somebody who is like consultant, freelancer, or maybe they're like, I want to leave my in-house job and I'm kind of curious. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say that the market is not saturated at all. It is a skill, like I said, that's going to be here with our lifetimes. And it is a really valuable skill that's so meaningful that you can say, hey, I want to focus in this cause area or with this type of nonprofit. This is what I want to leave as a legacy to get funding for this program or to make this change in the world. So it's something it's a legacy job, but it can also bring in an income for you, and it can create freedom and flexibility in your life. So it's such a win-win. I'm so passionate about it. And that it doesn't have to be hard. They don't have to do it all at once. There's sources out there that can take them. They don't have to have the best grammar. They don't have to have a degree in, whatever in writing or none of that. They can learn the skill, and it's very formulaic. They can learn the skill and they can have the support and they can easily get clients. So go forward.
Awesome. What would be a recent book, or maybe one that you read a while ago, that influenced the way that you teach or your programs, or just kind of like did any influencing that you're like, oh, that's a good one?
Oh, I like this question. I haven't, I've read some really, really good books. Okay. Recently, let's say Take Back Your Time. I think that's Dan Martell. Really good. Self-Coaching One-on-One by Brooke Castillo. Super good for the mindset portion. Yeah, love that. We actually use that book inside our academy. And We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. Love that book.
Those are some good ones.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyone in my program knows the like think, feel, act cycle. So they've had a little bit of like that kind of inner work, inner self-coaching through that. Because that informs what we do, the actions we take, and the results. So that's a good one. That's a really good one. Will you share a success story from your career? Because how long have you been an entrepreneur? How long have you been in this space?
This is my 10th year. So 2024 is my 10th year in business. I'm really excited. I'm also a dragon, and it's the year of the dragon. So I'm all about it. So so a success story. I think for me too, is creating this movement that I have. Like, that's really been the big shining light, is to say, I was just kind of doing the grant writing because I got trained in it, and I loved getting trained in it. I love how I started grant writing. But then I kind of got just a little bit bitter working inside a nonprofit, all of that. And then when I opened my own business, it was hard at first, right? I had all those thoughts. I had undercharging. I had all the things going on, and had to really figure that out and double down on that a lot. But overall, I think one of the biggest successes recently has been the academy, the Freelance Grant Writer Academy that I've developed, because within it hasn't even been a full year that we've repositioned this program. We already have over 150 people in this program, and collectively they've secured over $60 million in grants and over $1.3 million in their grant writing businesses in less than a year. So that's that I can, like, this is my legacy that I'm leaving, right? Is this program and helping all of these people, and then the nonprofits that they help, and all the monies they raise for amazing programs in the world. It's just like this trickle effect. So I'm just really, really happy to be where I'm at right now. And to me, like, having success for my students is my success, right? So yeah. Yeah.
It's the best. Isn't
Yeah.
it the best of just like seeing their wins, seeing their celebration, celebrating alongside them, and just being like, holy crap, like it's happening. It's happening. Yeah.
Last week, when 1 week alone, we had 3 people quit their 9 to 5 jobs and go full time into freelance grant
Wow.
writing, like in just 1 week. So it was such a celebration, like all these people in the same time, like stepping down, and 3 people, like that's amazing. That just changed their lives. And because they were able to have set up their business in the academy, now they have cash flow, now they can do that, all the things, right? So it was just like really cool to be like, oh, in 1 week we had 3 people quit their 9 to 5.
And if we have anyone listening who's like, okay, we would like to hire a freelancer.
Yeah.
Do you have a referral network? I feel like I've forwarded you a few, but like, is that something that they can reach out to you for and say, hey, we're this type of organization. Here's what we're looking for. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what we do is, it's our academy students, and how they can actually be listed on our directory is they have to at least written 4 grants that have gotten awarded, and we've had to review at least one of them. So we do vet them to come on, but they have to be inside our programs to be there as well. Like, we don't accept just payment for that or whatever. It's like we're helping like nurture these individuals. So they can go to our website for that. And we just have it, grantwritingandfunding.com. I hire a grant writer. It's like hire -a-grant-writer. And I think you can get the show notes for that, but definitely go to our website, grantwritingandfunding.com, so you can see our directory. And there you can see like, oh, this person writes federal grants for housing, and that's what we are. So you'll be able to see like that specifically to kind of go through and figure out who you'd like to set up a discovery call with. We don't do any of the processing on that end with them. It's up to the freelancers, but we just give them the opportunity to be listed on our website, so we can be just a directory there.
All right. We ask every guest to share one mantra, one thought they like to think on purpose, just any sort of affirmation. Well, I know you've already shared one with us, but share one for this episode.
Sure. Maybe I think for me, it's more of like my word of the year. Like, so.
Perfect.
Yeah. And it's unlimited. So I just feel like this sense of, like no limits, no boundaries, like unlimited, like, is that potential, abundance, like whatever that is, I'm like, just step into unlimited. And I think what I've really thought about it for myself is just, those unlimited self-protecting boundaries that I've kind of put up in the past, and breaking those down and stepping forward into my identity more and more courageously every day. So
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good word of the year. That's going to be on my short list for next year. I like it. So we will link to the Academy in the show notes, because people, I know you live launch, but we will link to, maybe, is there a wait list or something like that too, if they're freelance curious, or maybe they do have that volunteer that they're like, hey, listen, let's invest in our volunteer going through this. So we will link to that. Yeah.
Yep, we can definitely have that. And that's just at grantwritingandfunding.com. And then we'll have our academy there. So you can definitely find us there. If you go /freelance-academy, you can find it. And we also have our podcast too. So for those podcast listeners out there, we're Grant Writing and Funding. We have a lot of our students hosted on there as well, and featured on our podcast. You can hear behind the scenes about the program. We talk a lot about our movement. We talk a lot about the different things that are happening in the industry, and have people on like yourself, Christina, on our podcast as well. So definitely check us out there as well. And that's where we are.
Amazing. Thank you for coming back. You always leave me more uplifted, more motivated, and you're such a light in this sector. So thank you for coming back.
Oh, thank you. It's been so awesome. Thanks for having me back. All right. See you later.